Hi, thank you for tuning in. This is the Humor in Vigilante Justice. Is there a sense of humor behind killing a serial killer? Well, Dr. Sarah Hodgkins posits in Monsters, Madmen, and Myths that scholars rarely look at sociocultural contexts in which serial killers are allowed to flourish. As I move through Park Chan-Wook's revenge movies that he has directed and produced, we can examine the root issues that need to be nipped in the bud. In Park Chan-Wook's revenge films, he addresses the underlying sociocultural factors that lead our protagonists to become killers, to fight our serial killing antagonists who represent societal institutions like cyclical poverty, child extortion, and femicide. Moreover, I want to show that I contradict Galen's beliefs that our humors must be balanced for a person to be healthy. I posit that an imbalance in the humor choleric gives individuals the catalyst required for justice to be served to marginalized communities, and that Park Chan-Wook's movies embody characters who use choleric humor and revenge to enact justice. Furthermore, we observe that Park Chan-Wook's male and female choleric characters refute common gender stereotypes that Galen and other recent scholars believe about killers and revenge seekers and choleric characters. And that we'll see in his films that through transformation from melancholy to choleric personalities, the audience can acknowledge the protagonist's battle against structural violence enacted by institutions in the community on a macro level, while still addressing killer-victim relationships on a micro level. In Park Chan-Wook's revenge films, we see that there's a difference between the way choleric humor is used when it comes to male protagonists seeking justice and revenge versus women seeking justice and revenge. For instance, for women, the type of justice they are trying to achieve has a lot to do with womanhood. And whereas this is a contradiction to even real scholarly research that the FBI and others have produced. For instance, Dr. Sarah Hodgkins explains the biases in scholarly work centered around female serial killers and female killers. She explains that women are rarely seen as killers because they're supposed to be the nurturer and incapable of such acts of brutality. When they are serial killers, it's because they're forced by a male counterpart and that they are not acting on their own wishes. Or if they are acting on their own wishes and committing these brutal crimes, it's because they are unsexed and seen as a non-woman. Park Chan-Wook's Lady Vengeance both supports and refutes this idea. In Lady Vengeance, the main character is blackmailed into accepting charges for a crime committed by her teacher, a male serial killer who kidnaps her baby in order to escape conviction of his crimes. We see this main character go from melancholy youth to the choleric woman. Only through her embodiment of her choleric personality and her pursuit of revenge is she redeemed. We see this in supporting works that also are Asian cultured films. As in Kill Bill and Bulbul, they are raped and their sexual autonomy is taken from them, and these women must embrace their choleric quests to regain womanhood and thereby motherhood and become that nurturer once again, once the cycle is completed and justice is gained. For instance, in Bulbul, Similarly, like Beatrix, the main character in Kill Bill, who gets resurrected not once but actually twice. These women die physically but are reincarnated into vengeance seekers who battle the female struggle against sexual violence, forced child marriage, and also against social institutions in their communities, which we see in other Park Chan-Wook films. In Park Chan-Wook's films that have male protagonists, we see that revenge is enacted in different ways, but has overlapping themes. When we look at Old Boy and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, the other two movies in the Lady Vengeance trilogy, we see how revenge has different results. In Old Boy, the main character is imprisoned for 15 years by a rich character who is anonymous, and we are left to piece that together as the film goes on. His captor, we learn, can represent a rich, privatized penitentiary system that has prisoners. And the Old Boy main character's name is Odesu, and he would represent the prisoners. And those prisoners represent the marginalized communities who get imprisoned by rich elite that are profiting from the system, toying with people's lives and forcing them into silence. Odesu's imprisoned during his own naivete, just like Lady Vengeance. And as he's in prison for 15 years, he's able to go through his transformation. Upon getting captured, he is hot-headed and an alcoholic and angry. And as he goes through his transformation in his one-room imprisonment, he goes from despondent and melancholy character trying to kill himself several times to forming a resolve and one day seeking revenge and justice. However, we see that Odesu doesn't get redeemed at the end, and he has to accept that he is forced into silence, and he must actually disable himself to become reintegrated back into society. Juxtaposed, we see another male protagonist who is seeking revenge in the final movie in Park Chan-Wook's revenge trilogy, called Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. In this case, our main character starts out disabled, and he remains disabled throughout the film. He's a deaf and mute man who can only communicate through sign language. Not only is he deaf and mute, but he is also an impoverished factory worker. Due to his poverty, he cannot afford treatment for his ill sister. So after trying to get money by donating an organ to a black market doctor, he is left in an ice bath with no reciprocated payments and one organ less and no way to pay for his sister's treatment. Therefore, his anger, due to his poverty and marginalized status, transforms him into the choleric character. And unfortunately, his poverty and marginalized status is killing his sister because there's no social health care and his wages aren't enough for them to survive. By proxy, this unethical standard in society forces him to pursue vigilante justice in effort to gain a better quality of life. Therefore, at a macro level, we see that the institutions are the killers, and they are the serial killers, killing mass killings, right, of the marginalized community. And unfortunately, in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, his quest for revenge is in vain in the end. He ends up kidnapping his boss's daughter for ransom. And though he treats her very, very well, she is accidentally killed. She drowns. And his boss, the once oppressor, now becomes a vengeance seeker as well. And therefore, the hunter becomes the hunted. And our true crime narrative transforms into a gothic narrative when we have our male-centered protagonists that are the choleric characters. In the end, in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, both the hunter and the hunted die. And so we can see both in Old Boy and in Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance that neither party wins when individuals are trying to attack other individuals. When both sides are trying to enact revenge, neither party wins, and the root issues underlying the structural violence in society does not get resolved. Furthermore, we see that when individuals seek revenge against institutions, instead of the micro level of individuals against individuals, that justice is achieved. So whereas in Old Boy and in Sympathy for Mr. Revenge, those two male protagonists were seeking revenge against an actual individual, but they weren't addressing, they were blind to the issues, the real issues that needed to be transformed, and the transformational justice that has to be done at the root issues and the macro level. So in Snowpiercer, this changes. It is a male protagonist, but he is trying to take down a whole system, which is represented by a train that is on a railroad that goes throughout the entire world, and that the remaining survivors in the world are on this train, and that only the rich get to be at the front of the train, and all of the poor have to work and live in the back of the train, and their children are taken for child labor. But they in the end succeed by derailing the train, and the one woman and one child goes free, which is a representation of a system being wiped out, the class system being wiped out, and that child labor is ended, and that femicide and the unfair treatment of women is ended. And so we see that when women are the killers and the protagonists, they end up succeeding in transforming their cultures, their societies, their place in life. They're able to regain a sense of honor and innocence and purity and womanhood. Whereas men in these revenge films, their color gets the best of them, and it blinds them to the real issues that need to be addressed when they're going after individuals instead of institutions. And that with Snowpiercer, we see that, and with our women protagonists in Lady Revenge, Kill Bill, and Bulbul, that the use of color is transformational because it's used for social productivity to answer a social problem within the community. Thank you.